Hi, and welcome to 3dmotive.com. My name is Stephen G. Wells, and I'm a senior 3D artist. In this quick tips and tricks tutorial, we're going to take a look at the UI in 3D Studio Max. Okay, this is the basic setting for it. You'll end up getting a 4-panel view of the different viewports. You have top, front, left, and perspective. That technically is the perspective view. This is our move gizmo. It allows you to rotate around your scene. You can actually grab the ring and actually rotate it on an axis, which is good. Or again, you can just rotate around. You can actually do this in any of the scenes. You can actually tilt it in a particular direction. You can just rotate it around. If you do it the front, you can rotate it around that way. But do keep in mind that as these panels say, see this orthographic? It means there's no real depth information. So it doesn't deal with it very well. If you're going to look for depth, you need perspective. Anything that's at the top, the front, or the left, those will be what's called orthogonal. There's no depth cue, no depth information. Only in the perspective do you get that sort of feel if there's something there. Let's go ahead and I'm just going to go to the Create tab. You have a couple different tabs up here. You have the Create, you have the Modify, you have the Hierarchy, you have Motion, you have Display, and you have Utilities. Obviously the Create is where you'd create your different objects. You can do the geometry, actual mesh. You can do shapes, which will be curves in Maya. You can create lights, cameras, you have helpers, you have space warps, and you have systems. If you click this next one that looks like a rainbow, this is modify. This is again what it says. It's where you can modify your mesh, you can modify your vertices, you can add things, scale things like that. The hierarchy is where you can adjust the pivot of your particular object. Most objects will come with a center pivot point, so you can affect the pivot only, you can affect the object only, you can do a lot of things with that. For the motion, it's not something we're going to deal with at this point, and it's not something, again, this is just where you would find it. Display, again, that's one of those things. This will show you where you can actually hide certain categories on your viewport if you needed to. And again, utilities is pretty much what it says. These are the built-in utilities that you'd find in 3D Studio Max. They come in handy. Some of them come in more handy than others. I use the collapse a lot. I use the reset X form a lot, and then I use the resource collector. Resource collector is if you have a particular model that has particular textures, you can actually click this button and it'll say, okay, where do you want to save it to? And then you can collect and copy all the bitmaps and textures that go with it, and you can put it into one particular file. You can also include the actual Max file. You can actually copy it or you can move it. In this case, obviously, you should just be doing the copying. Let's just go for a quick create. I'm just going to create a sphere. I'm going to just click in our top view, and as you can see, it pulls it out in all the different views. I'm going to go ahead and use my viewport toggle. My shortcut is W, so I just hit W to bring that up, and to rotate. There are a couple different methods. Again, I have a shortcut that starts that off at least, so mine is V, but you can also use this gizmo at any time. It just rotates around the model, etc. Okay, that just keeps it nice and simple. You have your different menus up here, and you have your different some of the different modeling or different suites within 3D Studio Max. You have the graphite modeling tool, you have the freeform, selection, object paint, stuff like that. Again, if you're just looking at Max as modeling and such, a lot of times you're just going to be in the graphite modeling section more than anything else. You have a few little menus up here. If you hold your mouse over any one of them without even clicking on it, it'll tell you what it is. This is select and link. This is break the link. This is like parroting and unparroting. This is the move, select and move. This is rotate. This is scale. Anytime you have a little tiny arrow in one of those corners, it means there's other selections there. So you can just left click and hold, and I can do a uniform scale, non-uniform scale, and then the scale from it's a select and squash kind of scale. I'm just going to click that back and go back to my uniform scale. That's the uniform scale. This is the pivots. This is the center points. if you left click and hold, usually I'll go to this middle one. That way I'm scaling out from the pivot point. These are our snap tools. Now there is a little icon here that if you click and hold, you have in 2 and 2.5D and then 3. Also, if you right click it, it'll bring up this little dialog box, the grid and snap settings. Now with the snaps, you can snap to your grid points. That means the grid points, as you can see on our grid. You can actually do it the grid lines. If you'll notice, it's actually selecting on the lines now. See that? And I can slide in any direction. You can do all of these: midpoint, center face, endpoint, tangents, blah blah blah. I tend to use vertex for the most part. And the options, you can use the the axis constraints, meaning if you click it in just the X or just the Y, it'll move it just in that particular mode. In this case, let me get on the move. This is the transform gizmo in 3D Studio Max. It's just like the one in Maya, so I can just click and drag on the X and click and drag on on the Y. Let me rotate around a little bit and do that again. There we go, on the Y and on the Z. Okay, there we go. Oops, I've actually got it snapped off. There you go. If you click off this axis constraints, you can still control the axis constraint on it, no problem. But once you turn that off, you can in fact move in several different directions at once. It just depends on what you want to be able to do with that. Also, one of the things that 3D Studio Max should have, but it's kind of hidden, is the axis constraints tab. Now these are the default tabs that they set up for you, but you can add a tab in here. To do that, all you have to do is find any of this gray area and just right click. And then here's this one here that says axis constraints. If you click on that, this is your axis constraints. This allows you to do X, Y, Z, ZX, depending on how you set up your coordinate system. I usually do mine X, Y, things like that. Of course, this actually would then kind of interfere with your viewport as you're trying to deal with things. The fun thing is to dock this, we just have to left click, and we're just going to drag it up till we look like we're intersecting that main piece, and then just let go. It created the new dock, and that's when you restart 3D Studio Max, that will always be there for you from then on out. Okay, so that's a really fun thing to have. And here I am again moving in the X and Y. We have X and Y set. Here we have just in the Z. So it's good to have that. It's something that I like to have set up. If by chance, I'm going to hit my toggle to go back to the 4 panel. If, for instance, you don't like this particular setup, there's different things you can do. You can just left click on that little plus right there, and you can go to this configure viewports. Now mine is set up as the 4 panel, but you can see you have a number of different choices. You have the single panel, the 2 panels vertical, 2 panels horizontal, 2 panels, tiny little space on top, bigger space on bottom, the reverse over here. You can have 3 panel vertical, flipping that over to the other 3 panel. Here's another 3 panel, 3 panel. Here's 4 panel, 3 small sides, 1 big one, and the reverse of that. So it's pretty much whatever you want to be able to do. I particularly like my 4 panels, so I like to leave them there. Also, a lot of times when you're modeling, you want to know how many polygons you're working with, etc. And that's under statistics. So if you're going to click statistics, this is where you can turn on your poly count, your tri count, your triangle count, edge count, vertex count, frames per second. I don't know anybody who ever uses frames per second. But I usually have the poly count on and then the vertex count on. I sometimes do the triangle count when I'm going to do a model between Max and Maya just to make sure they're all squared away. Also, then you want to make sure that if you're going to do this, you want to be in total and selection. That merely means as you're working on a model, if you've got 20 different models in here, it'll show you what you've got selected, but it'll also show you, oops, and I'm sorry, it didn't show it because I forgot to click something. You have to click this button here, show statistics in the active view. Okay, so there we go, we're in our active view. If I click to here, all right, it should have updated, and actually I'm surprised it didn't. Once you do it for one, it's supposed to do it for all. That's the first time I've ever actually seen something like that. That's really odd. But if I had this, is right now it's showing us I got 120 polygons, 120 tries. if I were to have a couple different models in here, it would have showed me total too. I could have like 2,000 polys in here, but I've only got this particular one selected, so it's only going to show that particular number and what we're dealing with, etc. If you don't like that up there, you can always go to configure viewports, turn off the statistics. I use it if you're trying to hit a particular poly count. Sometimes when you're working on games like for mobile applications, you have to have a very, very, very low poly count on models, and it helps keep in mind with what you're trying to work with. So you have an idea of how you're going to keep the poly counts down and where you can turn on and work angles and such on the particular model. Also, for this particular model, this sphere, it comes in red. It's just the default. 3D Studio Max will apply just default colors to everything you create. If you want to change that at any time, you just come over here to where it says Sphere 001, click on this color bar, and you can change it to anything you want. Okay, so let's change it to blue. It's simple. You can turn on your wireframe by hitting F3. Okay, you can turn off your wireframe on the model by hitting F4. See, that just shows the wireframe on and off. So if you don't like it, you can just turn it off. If you don't want the grid on showing, just hit G. It's nice and simple. We'll hit F4 again. Selecting the model, you just have to click on it. That's really all I have to do. You can set up shortcuts for everything in 3D Studio Max. If you want to deselect, for me, I have a shortcut for that, such as D, or you just select off. There'll be a lot of times when you're working with a bunch of different models, you want to be able to just go ahead and just hit D and you're out of it. So it's something to keep in mind. Right now you have the ambient occlusion with the hardware shading on, and in our perspective, you can change a lot of stuff with this. You can change out not only your layout, you can change the statistics, but you can change how you want to turn around and have what sort of rendering you want to have shown. Like, do you want to have a bounding box around your model? Do you want the wireframe? You want it flat? You want it faceted? You want it highlights? Rendering options, you can disable textures. There's a whole bunch of things within this that you can turn around and play with to make your particular default. But that's just a very, very quick introduction into the UI in 3D Studio Max and what you can do with it. I hope that's been fun for you. My name is Stephen G. Wells, and this has been 3dmotive.com, and thanks very much for watching.